The sleek black Audi rolled down Maple Street, its tinted windows reflecting the small storefronts of Riverdale like a mirror to the past. Zachary Lawson gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening as he approached the town he'd fled 12 years ago. His throat constricted at the sight of the weathered "Welcome to Riverdale" sign, its paint chipping at the edges just like his resolve to remain emotionally detached from this visit. As CEO of ZL Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, Zach had spent the last decade building walls higher than the skyscrapers that housed his corporate offices. Now he was back only because his father's health had deteriorated, and even Zach's carefully constructed indifference couldn't withstand that news. He slowed the car as he passed Morgan's Hardware, still standing with its red brick facade and hand-painted sign. Old Mr. Morgan had taught him how to fix a bike chain when he was 10. The memory came unbidden, and Zach pushed it away, adjusting his Italian silk tie as if tightening his grip on the present. The Riverdale Cafe appeared ahead on the right, and despite himself, Zach's eyes scanned the outdoor patio. A flash of auburn hair caught his attention, and his foot instinctively pressed the brake. Olivia Evans sat at a corner table, her face buried in a book, just as she had throughout high school. His best friend. The only person who had ever truly known him. Before he could think better of it, Zach pulled into an empty parking spot across the street. He sat for a moment, his hands still on the wheel, wondering what he was doing. He'd planned to drive straight to his father's house, make the necessary arrangements for his care and leave. Seeing Liv hadn't been part of the plan, but then again, she'd never followed his plans anyway. Taking a deep breath, Zach stepped out of the car, the soft leather of his Italian shoes meeting the cracked sidewalk. He straightened his tailored suit jacket armor for the corporate battlefield he normally inhabited and crossed the street. Olivia didn't look up until his shadow fell across her table. When she did, her green eyes widened, then narrowed in disbelief. "Zachary Lawson," she said, closing her book with a definitive thud. "The prodigal son returns." He hadn't prepared for this moment, for how her voice would sound exactly the same yet different a melody he'd forgotten he knew by heart. "Hello, Liv." She stood, and he noticed she was still petite, barely reaching his shoulder. She wore a simple sundress, her auburn hair longer than he remembered, cascading past her shoulders in loose waves. She looked both exactly the same and completely different. 12 years, she said, not a question but an accusation. "I know." There was no defense he could offer that would suffice. "May I sit?" She gestured to the chair across from her, and he lowered himself into it, feeling oddly like a giant in a dollhouse. Everything in Riverdale seemed smaller now. "Your father called me," she said, getting straight to the point. "He told me you were coming." Zach nodded. "His heart isn't good. I need to make arrangements for his care." And then leave again. Her directness hadn't changed. It had always been what he valued most about her ability to see through him, to call him on his bullshit. "That's the plan," he admitted, watching her face carefully. Olivia laughed, a sound that carried no humor. Same old Zach, always with a plan. A waitress approached, saving him from responding. "Can I get you anything, sir?" "Just coffee, black." When the waitress left, Olivia leaned forward. "So, Mr. CEO, how does it feel to be back in the town you couldn't wait to escape?" The question stung with its accuracy. "Strange," he admitted. "Everything looks the same but feels different." "That's because you're different," she replied. "The town hasn't changed, you have." The waitress returned with his coffee, and Zach wrapped his hands around the mug, grateful for something to do with them. "How have you been, Liv?" Cutting straight to small talk, she raised an eyebrow. "That's new." The Zach I knew would have told me my observation was irrelevant and changed the subject. He winced. "I deserved that." "Yes, you did." She sipped her tea, studying him over the rim of her cup. "I've been good. I took over the town library after Mrs. Jenkins retired. I bought the old Wilcox house on Elm Street. I have a golden retriever named Shakespeare, and I still make the best apple pie in 3 counties, according to your father." You've seen my father, the revelation surprised him. Every Sunday for dinner. Someone had to look in on him after your mother died and you. She trailed off, but the accusation hung in the air between them, and you disappeared. Guilt flooded Zach's chest. I didn't know. Of course not. You were busy becoming whoever it is you are now. She gestured at his expensive suit and watch. Which is who, exactly? Zach shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. I'm the CEO of ZL Innovations. We develop. I know what your company does, she interrupted. I read about your success, but that's not what I asked. Who are you, Zach? The question disarmed him. In boardrooms and business meetings, he always had an answer ready. But here, faced with Olivia's unflinching gaze, he found himself speechless. That's what I thought, she said softly, without triumph. She gathered her book and stood. Your father's expecting you. Don't disappoint him again. Before he could respond, she was walking away, her sundress swaying with each step. Zach watched her go, a hollow feeling expanding in his chest. He'd expected anger, accusations, maybe even indifference. What he hadn't expected was for Olivia to still see him so clearly, to look past the wealth and success to the lost boy underneath. It was unsettling. And strangely comforting. With a sigh, Zach left money on the table and headed back to his car. He had a father to face, and a past he could no longer outrun. The Lawson family home stood at the end of Oak Drive, a modest two-story colonial that had seemed enormous in Zach's childhood. Now, as he pulled into the driveway, it looked small and tired, the white paint fading and the garden overgrown. His father opened the door before Zach could knock, standing straighter than his 70 years and health should allow. "You're late," Gerald Lawson said gruffly, but his eyes betrayed a happiness that made Zach's chest tighten. "Traffic," Zach lied, not ready to admit he'd stopped to see Olivia. His father stepped aside to let him enter. "I suppose even big-shot CEOs get caught in traffic." The house smelled the same, a mixture of old books, pine cleaner, and the faint hint of his mother's perfume that somehow lingered years after her passing. Zach followed his father into the living room, noting the medical equipment that now occupied the corner where the Christmas tree had once stood. "I don't need all that junk," Gerald said, following Zach's gaze. Olivia insisted. "Liv seems to insist on a lot of things where you're concerned." Gerald settled into his recliner with a grunt. "Someone had to look after me when you disappeared to make your millions." The rebuke stung, but Zach knew it was justified. "I'm sorry, Dad, I should have visited more." "More, try it all." Gerald's expression softened slightly. "But you're here now. Sit down and tell me about this company of yours." Zach sat on the edge of the couch, feeling like an intruder in his childhood home. "The company's doing well. We just secured a major contract with the Department of Defense. That's not what I meant, and you know it." Gerald fixed him with a stare that had always been able to extract the truth. "Are you happy, son?" The question caught Zach off guard. Happiness wasn't a metric he often considered. Success, growth, profitability, these were his measurements. "I'm successful," he said carefully. Gerald nodded slowly. "That's what I was afraid of. You're turning into me." Zach frowned. "What do you mean?" "I spent my life chasing the next promotion, the next bonus. I missed your baseball games and school plays. I was barely there when your mother got sick." Gerald's voice cracked. "Don't make my mistakes, Zach." Uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, Zach stood. "Let's talk about your treatment options. I've been researching specialists in—" "Sit down," Gerald commanded, and to his own surprise, Zach obeyed. "I'm not going to any specialist. I'm staying right here in Riverdale." "But Dad, with your condition, my condition is that I'm old and my heart's giving out. It happens. I've made my peace with it." "I haven't," Zach said, his voice unexpectedly raw. Gerald's expression softened. "Then maybe it's time you did, time you made peace with a lot of things." He glanced at his watch. "Including the fact that Olivia will be here in 20 minutes with dinner and you're staying." Zach's pulse quickened at the mention of Liv. "I should get to the hotel, get settled." "Hotel?" Gerald scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Your room is exactly as you left it." The thought of sleeping in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of who he used to be, made Zach's palms sweat. But the stubborn set of his father's jaw told him this wasn't a battle he'd win. Fine, he conceded. I'll stay, but just for tonight. Gerald's smile was knowing. We'll see. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Zach had changed into jeans and a casual shirt, feeling oddly vulnerable without his suit. He hung back in the living room as his father went to answer the door, Olivia's voice drifting in moments later. I brought lasagna and garlic bread, she was saying. And I picked up your prescription from. She stopped abruptly as she entered the living room and saw Zach. Oh, you're still here. Apparently, I'm staying for dinner, Zach said, attempting a smile. Olivia looked at Gerald, who shrugged innocently. The more the merrier, he said, taking the food from her and heading toward the kitchen. You two catch up while I set the table. Dad, Zach started, but Gerald had already disappeared, leaving him alone with Olivia. She crossed her arms. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. It's fine, Zach said, suddenly aware of how different she looked in his father's house than she had at the cafe. More relaxed, more at home. You've been taking care of him. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Someone had to. Thank you, he said, meaning it. I should have been here. Olivia's expression softened slightly. Yes, you should have, but you're here now. The simplicity of her forgiveness, or at least her willingness to set aside her anger, humbled him. I don't deserve that. Probably not, she agreed, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. But your father does. He needs this dinner to be civil. Zach nodded, grateful for her understanding, even if he hadn't earned it. I can do civil. Good, then come help me convince him to take his medicine. He's as stubborn as you are. Following her into the kitchen, Zach was struck by how easily Olivia moved through his father's house, knowing exactly where everything was kept, expertly navigating around Gerald as she prepared the meal. They worked with the comfortable rhythm of people who had done this many times before. Set the salad on the table, Zach, his father instructed, and the normalcy of it being given a household task, being part of a family dinner felt surreal after years of solitary meals in his penthouse or business dinners with colleagues. As they ate, Gerald regaled them with town gossip, and Zach found himself laughing genuinely for the first time in years at the story of how Mrs. Peterson's prize-winning chickens had escaped and disrupted the town council meeting. Remember when we let Mr. Wilson's goats loose during homecoming? Olivia asked Zach, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The memory returned with startling clarity. Liv's whispered plan, the thrill of sneaking onto Wilson's property, the chaos that ensued when the goats invaded the football field. You were grounded for a month, Zach recalled. Worth it, Olivia grinned. Especially since you were too chicken to take the blame with me. I offered, Zach protested. After I'd already been caught, she countered. Gerald watched their exchange with undisguised pleasure. You two always were trouble together. The comments sobered Zach. They had been trouble together and so much more. Best friends, confidants, partners in everything from school projects to teenage rebellion. Until he'd left without a proper goodbye, determined to escape the smallness of Riverdale and the pain of his mother's death. After dinner, Gerald claimed fatigue and retired to his room, not before giving Zach a meaningful look that said he expected his son to make things right with Olivia. Alone in the kitchen, they fell into the familiar pattern of Zach washing while Olivia dried, a chore they'd done countless times in high school. You don't have to help, Zach said. I can finish up. I know, she replied simply, taking another plate from his hands, but some habits die hard. They worked in silence for a few minutes before Zach found the courage to ask what he'd been wondering all evening. Why did you do it? Take care of my father all these years? Olivia considered the question, carefully placing a dried glass in the cabinet. At first, it was because I was angry at you for leaving him. Then it was because he needed someone, and eventually, it was because I realized he'd become family to me. Her answer made his chest ache with a mixture of gratitude and shame. He's lucky to have you. Yes, she agreed without pretense. He is. She handed him the dish towel and leaned against the counter. "Why are you really back, Zach? Your father's been sick for months." The question cut to the heart of what he'd been avoiding. "I got the call that this time it's serious. That I might not have much time left with him." Olivia's expression softened. "And that scared you?" "Yes," he admitted, the truth easier to speak in the dim kitchen light than it had been in years. "I've spent so long running away from this place, from who I was here. But when I thought about my father dying without seeing him again—" "You realized that running away doesn't actually work," she finished for him. Zach nodded, unable to hold her gaze. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Liv." "Yes, you have." She pushed away from the counter and moved toward the door. "Starting with the way you left." The accusation hung between them, and Zach knew she deserved an explanation, one he'd never given her. "I couldn't stay. After Mom died, everything here reminded me of her, including you." Olivia paused, her hand on the doorframe. "Me. You were there for everything, her diagnosis, the treatments, the funeral. You saw me at my worst, my weakest. Every time I looked at you, I remembered how broken I was." The confession felt like ripping open an old wound, letting the poison finally drain. "I needed to become someone stronger, someone who wouldn't fall apart like that again." Olivia turned to face him fully, her expression a mixture of hurt and understanding. "So you became Zachary Lawson, CEO, the man with the perfect plan and the impenetrable armor." "Something like that," he admitted. "And did it work? Are you not broken anymore?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Before he could formulate an answer, Olivia shook her head. "Never mind, it's late and I should go. Tell your father I'll check on him tomorrow." "Liv, wait." Zach moved toward her, closing the distance between them. "I owe you an apology, for leaving the way I did, for not staying in touch, for everything." She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Is that why you stopped by the cafe today, to apologize?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I saw you sitting there and I needed to see if you were real, I guess." A small, sad smile curved her lips. "I'm real, Zach. I've been real this whole time." With that, she turned and left, the sound of her car starting moments later. Zach stood in the doorway, watching her taillights disappear down the street, feeling as if he'd missed something vital, something just beyond his reach. Later, lying in his childhood bed surrounded by faded posters and trophies, Zach stared at the ceiling and wondered how he'd become a stranger to himself. The next morning, Zach woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was a teenager again, about to head downstairs to find his mother cooking breakfast. The reality hit him a second later. His mother was gone, his father was ill, and he was a visitor in his own childhood home. Pulling on jeans and a t-shirt, he made his way downstairs to find his father at the stove, looking frailer in the morning light but determined as he flipped pancakes. "You shouldn't be doing that," Zach said, moving to take the spatula. "Let me." Gerald surrendered the utensil but fixed his son with a stern look. "I'm sick, not helpless. Been making my own breakfast for years." "I know, Dad, Zach trailed off, unsure how to explain the sudden protectiveness he felt. "Wanna help," Gerald finished for him. "Then sit down and talk to me. Really talk." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Gerald set down his fork with deliberate precision. "I saw Olivia's face when she left last night." "What did you do?" Zach winced. "Nothing, I tried to explain why I left the way I did." "And did you tell her the whole truth?" Gerald's gaze was unwavering. "What do you mean? Son, I may be old, but I'm not blind. You were in love with that girl and you ran because you were scared." The statement hit Zach like a physical blow. "Dad, Liv and I were just friends," Gerald scoffed. "Keep telling yourself that. Meanwhile, you broke her heart and yours because you were too afraid to admit how you felt." "That's not, it is," Gerald interrupted. "And now you're doing the same thing with this visit, playing CEO, making arrangements, keeping your distance. But I see you, son. The real you underneath all that success." Zach pushed away from the table, uncomfortable with his father's perceptiveness. "I have some calls to make. Business doesn't stop just because I'm in Riverdale." Gerald shook his head sadly. "Hiding behind work, you really are turning into me." The words followed Zach as he retreated to the porch with his phone, pretending to check emails while his mind raced. Was his father right? Had he been running not just from grief but from his feelings for Olivia? The possibility was too overwhelming to contemplate. He was still sitting on the porch, lost in thought, when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Olivia stepped out, carrying a paper bag that Zach guessed contained more medication for his father. She hesitated when she saw him, then straightened her shoulders and approached. "Morning. I brought your dad's new prescription." "He's inside," Zach said, standing. "Thank you for doing this." Olivia nodded, her expression guarded. "It's what I do." Before she could move past him, Zach gently caught her arm. "Liv, about last night, it's fine, Zach." She pulled away. "You don't owe me any more explanations." "But I want to explain," he insisted. "Can we talk? Maybe take a walk?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Let me give this to your dad first." 5 minutes later, they were walking along the familiar path that led to the creek where they'd spent countless summer days as teenagers. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. "So," Olivia finally said, "what more did you want to explain?" Zach took a deep breath. "My father said something this morning that made me think about why I really left." Olivia glanced at him sideways. "And he thinks I was in love with you," Zach said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. "That I ran because I was afraid of how I felt." Olivia stopped walking, her expression unreadable. "And what do you think?" Zach ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty he'd trained himself to suppress in the boardroom. "I think he might be right. I think I've spent 12 years building a life designed to keep people at a distance, because getting close to anyone felt too risky after losing my mom. And maybe especially you, because you were already so close." A complex mix of emotions crossed Olivia's face: hurt, anger, confusion. "So you left without a word, built an empire, and now you're back to tell me you think you might have had feelings for me 12 years ago. What am I supposed to do with that, Zach?" Her anger was justified, and Zach knew it. "Nothing. I don't expect anything from you, Liv. I needed to be honest, finally." They reached the creek, the water burbling over rocks just as it had when they were kids. Olivia sat on a large boulder, her gaze fixed on the flowing water. "You know what hurt the most?" she asked quietly. "Not that you left. I understood you needed to get away after your mom. What hurt was that you became someone else entirely. The Zach I knew would never have gone years without checking on his father. He would never have cut off his best friend without a word." Zach sat beside her, careful to maintain some distance. "I thought I needed to become someone new to survive, someone who didn't feel things so deeply." "And did it work?" she asked, echoing her question from the previous night. This time, Zach answered honestly. "No, I just got better at pretending." Olivia turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time since he'd returned. "You know what's ironic? I always knew how you felt about me. I was just waiting for you to figure it out yourself." The revelation stunned him. "You knew," a sad smile played at her lips. "Of course I knew. I felt the same way." The admission hung in the air between them, a missed opportunity spanning over a decade. "Liv, I'm so sorry." "For what exactly?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "For leaving. For not being brave enough to admit how I felt. For missing out on what might have been." She nodded slowly, accepting his apology without absolution. "The thing is, Zach, I'm not sure I even know who you are anymore. The boy I loved is somewhere inside that CEO exterior, but I don't know if he still exists." The word "loved" pierced him, a confirmation of what could have been. "I'm not sure I know either," he admitted. "Coming back here, seeing you, being in my father's house, it's like looking through a window at someone I used to be." "Then maybe that's what this visit needs to be about," Olivia said. "Not just making arrangements for your father, but figuring out who Zachary Lawson really is beneath all that success." They sat in silence for a while, watching the creek flow past, before heading back to the house. As they approached, Zach noticed his father sitting on the porch, watching them with undisguised hope in his eyes. "He's playing matchmaker," Olivia said with a small laugh. "Is it working?" Zach asked, only half joking. She gave him a thoughtful look. That depends on whether you're planning to disappear again once your father's care is arranged. The question was fair, and Zach didn't have an immediate answer. His life was in New York, his company, his penthouse, his carefully constructed existence. But being back in Riverdale, seeing Olivia again, was awakening feelings he'd thought long buried. I don't know what I'm planning anymore, he said honestly. Olivia nodded, as if his uncertainty was answer enough. Well, while you figure it out, there's the town festival this weekend. Your father was looking forward to going before his health took a turn. Maybe you could take him. The Harvest Festival, they still do that. Some traditions don't change, she said. I'm in charge of the book sale booth. Stop by if you want. With that, she left him on the walkway, heading to her car with a wave to Gerald. Zach watched her go, feeling as if he were standing at a crossroads without a map. She's something special, isn't she? His father called from the porch. Zach couldn't disagree. She always was. The next few days fell into an unexpected pattern. Zach would work remotely in the mornings, fielding calls and emails from his executive team. In the afternoons, he'd help his father with household tasks or drive him to doctor's appointments. And in the evenings, Olivia would often stop by with dinner or to check on Gerald's medication. Each interaction with Liv chipped away at the walls Zach had built. She didn't make it easy for him. She questioned his business decisions, challenged his assumptions, and refused to be impressed by his success. But she also laughed at his jokes, remembered his favorite foods, and gradually began to treat him less like a visitor and more like someone who belonged. By the time the Harvest Festival arrived on Saturday, Zach found himself looking forward to it with an eagerness that surprised him. He helped his father dress warmly against the autumn chill and carefully settled him into the passenger seat of his Audi. Fancy car, Gerald commented, running his hand over the leather interior. Does it make you happy? The question was becoming a refrain between them, and Zach's answers were growing more honest. It's comfortable, but no, it doesn't make me happy. Gerald nodded, satisfied. Now we're getting somewhere. The town square was transformed for the festival, with colorful booths, string lights, and the scent of apple cider and cinnamon wafting through the air. Despite his initial reluctance, Zach found himself enjoying the familiar sights and sounds of his hometown celebration. He spotted Olivia at the book sale booth, her auburn hair tied back as she helped a young girl select a novel. Watching her, Zach felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the hot cider in his hand. Go talk to her, Gerald urged, giving his son a gentle push. I'm going to sit with Bill and the other old-timers. We've got complaints to compare. Zach made his way to the book booth, waiting until Olivia finished with her young customer before approaching. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. You came, she said, sounding pleasantly surprised. Dad wouldn't miss it, Zach replied, then added more honestly, and neither would I, apparently. Olivia gestured to the book spread before her. See anything you'd like to read? I remember you used to devour science fiction. The fact that she remembered his reading preferences from their youth touched him. I haven't read for pleasure in years, he admitted. Always reports, contracts, business journals. That sounds terrible, she said with mock horror. Here, she handed him a worn paperback. Start with this. It's about a man who builds a time machine to fix his past mistakes. Seemed appropriate. Zach laughed, taking the book. Subtle. I've never been known for my subtlety, she replied with a grin. They fell into easy conversation, interrupted occasionally by customers. Zach found himself volunteering to help, organizing books and making change while Olivia handled the recommendations. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs just as they had as teenagers. You're good at this, Olivia commented during a lull. What's selling used books? Working with people, she clarified. You have a way of making each customer feel important. I bet that serves you well as a CEO. The observation surprised him. I never thought about it that way. I always considered my business acumen my greatest asset. That's because you don't see yourself clearly, Olivia said matter-of-factly. You never have. Before he could respond, a commotion near the center of the square caught their attention. Gerald had collapsed, clutching his chest, surrounded by concerned townspeople. Dad. Zach sprinted across the square, fear gripping his heart. He reached his father's side just as someone called for an ambulance. I'm fine, Gerald was insisting, though his pallor and labored breathing suggested otherwise. Just got a little dizzy. Olivia appeared beside them, her face calm though her eyes betrayed her worry. The ambulance is on its way, let's get him comfortable. Together they helped Gerald to a bench. Zach held his father's hand, trying to keep his own panic at bay. Hang in there, Dad. Gerald managed a weak smile. Don't look so worried, son. It takes more than a faulty ticker to take down a Lawson. The ambulance arrived minutes later, and Zach insisted on riding with his father. Olivia promised to follow in her car after closing up the book booth. The next few hours blurred together the emergency room, doctors speaking in measured tones, tests being run. By the time Olivia arrived, Gerald had been stabilized and admitted for observation. It was a warning sign, the doctor explained to Zach. His heart is weakening faster than we anticipated. He needs more care than he can get at home. The words hit Zach like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm recommending a specialized care facility, at least temporarily, while we adjust his medication and monitor his condition. Zach nodded numbly, thanking the doctor before returning to his father's room where Olivia sat beside Gerald's bed, telling him a story about the festival to keep his spirits up. And then Mrs. Peterson's prize chicken got loose again and ended up on the judging table for the pie contest, she was saying, earning a weak chuckle from Gerald. Seeing Zach, she stood. I'll give you two some privacy. No, stay, Gerald insisted, reaching for her hand. Your family too. The simple declaration brought tears to Olivia's eyes, and she sat back down, squeezing Gerald's hand. Zach pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. The doctor says you need more specialized care, Dad. Gerald's face hardened. I'm not going to some nursing home to die. It's not a nursing home, Zach insisted. It's a cardiac care center, just until they get your medication right. And then what? I go back to an empty house, waiting for the next attack. Gerald shook his head. No thank you, you wouldn't be alone, Olivia said softly. I'd still visit. Every day if you wanted. Gerald's expression softened as he looked at her, then at Zach. You're both good kids, but I want to be in my own home with my own things, surrounded by memories of your mother. Zach ran a hand through his hair, frustration warring with understanding. Dad, be reasonable, you need medical supervision. Then hire a nurse, Gerald countered. You can afford it, can't you, Mr. CEO? The barb stung, but Zach recognized the fear behind it. Yes, I can afford it, but that's not the point. It's exactly the point, Gerald insisted. I want to go home. Zach looked at Olivia, seeking support or guidance. She met his gaze steadily. What if there was another option, she asked. Both men turned to her, curious. What if, she continued carefully, Zach stayed, not just for a few days, but really stayed, worked remotely. Hired the nurse for medical care, but was there himself for everything else. The suggestion hung in the air, impossible and tantalizing. Zach's mind immediately raced through the logistics, what his company would need, how his board would react, the practicalities of running a tech giant from a small town. That's ridiculous, he began, but the look of hope on his father's face stopped him. Could you? Gerald asked, his voice smaller than Zach had ever heard it. Zach hesitated, caught between the life he'd built and the one he'd left behind. I don't know, maybe, temporarily at least. Olivia stood, touching his arm gently. Think about it, I'm going to get coffee, either of you want anything? When she'd left, Gerald fixed his son with a penetrating look. She still loves you, you know, after all this time. The statement caught Zach off guard. Dad, I don't think I do think, Gerald interrupted. I've watched that girl grow up, I've seen how she looks at you even now. And I see how you look at her when you think no one's watching. Zach had no response to that. Life is short, son, Gerald continued, gesturing to the hospital bed. Trust me on that. Don't waste it pretending to be someone you're not, living somewhere that doesn't feel like home. New York is my home now, Zach said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Gerald shook his head. No, it's where you live. There's a difference. The conversation was interrupted by Olivia's return. She handed Zach a coffee and set a cup of tea on Gerald's bedside table. The doctor says you can go home tomorrow if the tests look good overnight, she informed them. I already called Mrs. Jenkins. She's a retired nurse and she's willing to come by daily to check on you. Gerald beamed at her. See, problem solved. Zach knew it wasn't that simple, but he was too exhausted to argue. We'll figure it out tomorrow. As visiting hours ended, Zach and Olivia walked together to the parking lot. The night air was cool, stars visible in a way they never were in New York's light, polluted sky. You don't have to stay, Olivia said suddenly. I didn't mean to put you on the spot in there. Your father will be okay. I can look after him, and with a nurse coming in, it's not fair to you, Zach interrupted. You have your own life. You've already done so much. Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him. I don't do it out of obligation, Zach. I do it because I care about him, because he's family to me. I know, Zach said softly, and that means more than I can say. They stood in silence for a moment before Olivia spoke again. What are you really afraid of, Zach? Is it staying in Riverdale? Or is it staying and realizing that the life you built isn't the one you actually want? The question hit too close to the truth for comfort. I've worked hard to get where I am, he said defensively. I know you have, she acknowledged, and you've achieved incredible things. But are you happy, truly happy? It was the same question his father kept asking, and Zach was running out of ways to avoid answering it honestly. I don't know, he admitted. I thought success would be enough. But being back here, seeing you. Olivia waited, her expression open and patient. I keep thinking about what might have been, he continued. If I'd stayed, if I'd had the courage to tell you how I felt. And what do you feel now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zach took a step closer to her, confused, terrified, alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Olivia's smile was sad but genuine. That's a start. Without thinking, Zach leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that she returned after a moment of surprise. When they pulled apart, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've missed you, she said simply. The real you. Those words, more than anything, cemented the decision that had been forming in Zach's mind since his return. I've missed me too, he realized aloud. The next morning, Zach called a virtual emergency board meeting from his father's kitchen table. With Gerald resting upstairs, Zach laid out his plan to the skeptical faces on his laptop screen. 6 months, he said firmly. I'll work remotely from Riverdale for 6 months while we transition leadership responsibilities. After that, I'm stepping down as CEO. The uproar was immediate and predictable. Questions about the company's stability, concerns about investor confidence, demands for explanation. My personal circumstances have changed, Zach said, his voice steady. I need to be here for my father and for myself. It took 2 hours of negotiation, but in the end, the board reluctantly agreed to his terms. Zach would remain involved in major decisions and client relationships, but day-to-day operations would shift to his capable COO with an eye toward a permanent transition. When he finally closed his laptop, Zach felt lighter than he had in years. He looked up to find Olivia standing in the doorway, a tentative smile on her face. I let myself in, she explained. Brought soup for your dad. Her eyes searched his face. Are you okay? I couldn't help overhearing. Zach nodded, standing to approach her. I'm better than okay, I'm staying live. Not just for Dad, but for me, for what might be possible here. And what might that be? She asked, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. A second chance, he said, taking her hands in his. For us, if you're willing. I know I don't deserve it after all this time, and I know we can't just pick up where we might have started 12 years ago. But I'd like to try. To see if what I feel for you, what I've always felt for you, could grow into something real and lasting. Olivia studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Zachary Lawson, are you asking me on a date?" He laughed, relieved by her lightness. "Yes, I believe I am." "Then yes," she said simply. "Let's see where this goes." 6 months later, Zach stood in his father's backyard, now officially his backyard, watching as Gerald taught Olivia's nephew how to fly a kite. His father's health had stabilized with the right medication and care, and while he would never be completely well again, he had found a new vitality in his role as Zach's advisor for the small tech incubator Zach had started in Riverdale. The transition from CEO to small-town entrepreneur hadn't been without challenges. Zach still woke sometimes at 3 a.m., reaching for his phone to check international markets. But those moments were growing fewer, replaced by mornings spent running by the creek, afternoons working with local startups, and evenings with Olivia. Their relationship had evolved carefully, both of them aware of the weight of their history and the fragility of new beginnings. But with each date, each conversation, each moment of rediscovery, they grew closer, building something stronger than what might have been in their youth. "Penny for your thoughts," Olivia said, coming to stand beside him. She handed him a glass of lemonade, her fingers brushing his deliberately. "Just thinking about how different things are from what I planned," he admitted. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine being here, being happy here." Olivia leaned against him slightly. "And now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He set down his glass to turn and face her fully. "You were right, about everything. You always saw the real me, even when I couldn't see myself." She smiled, the same smile that had captivated him since they were teenagers. "That's what happens when you love someone for most of your life. You see past all the walls they build." The word love no longer frightened him. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I love you, Olivia Evans. I think I always have." "I know," she said with characteristic confidence. "I was just waiting for you to figure it out." As the sun began to set over Riverdale, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Zach pulled Olivia closer and kissed her. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that all his years of running had led him right back where he belonged, to his hometown, to his father, and most importantly, to the woman who had always known the real him beneath the success and the struggles, waiting patiently for him to find his way home.